It's the Dan heel turn episode.
It is kind of funny how some people did pick it out.
It is, but their reasons are completely wrong. So I want to make sure to address those.
I don't know. The one I heard was pretty good, but
a podcast about bourbon and the ones who drink it. This is Bourbon Matters.
But all right, yeah, let's get into it.
yeah,
Welcome to Bourbon Matters. I'm Jake.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Gold Eagle Jake.
And I just won the blend off.
Yeah, Jake won the blend off. So we're talking about the results. And
Gold Eagle Jake won the blend off. Let's be clear here.
Yeah,
Let's make sure we all have to say our names before we speak.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise people take our words and think someone else said them, apparently.
Yeah. Which set Dan off.
Which should we just start there? Can we get into this?
I guess we should
go
just
ahead
start
with your
there.
rant,
Go ahead, Dan.
So, okay. I was going to say we love our listeners, but we enjoy our listeners. And we always encourage everyone to like, comment, subscribe, whatever at the end, because engagement's always fun. However, this week we did have someone comment, and they're completely wrong, and they need to be put in their place is basically what this boils down to. So normally I like to look over this direction because I hate having to see my face. But I feel it's important that I just talk right directly into the camera for this.
Dan, I actually noticed that you'd never look into the camera.
I know, I hate looking into the camera. I hate seeing my own face. I always
do you
it's
have
on this
like
side
a
of my
fake
screen.
camera
so
that you try to? Do you have like a dot or a reference point that you try and look at off screen?
No, I look at the right 2/3 of my computer screen, not the left where my face normally is. But anyways, an idiot by the name of I think it was Andrew Pham 8029 or something left us a comment, and the comment had something to deal with Dan strikes again ... which just leaves some spaces. We get it. And then he had a quote that said, "I don't like the flavor," a quote that I said of, "I don't like the flavor profile of Buffalo Trace." You, Andrew Pham, are a piece of shit. You need to listen closer to when we talk, because that is obviously not my stupid voice that said that.
There
that would
goes
be normal
10% of our following.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say listener, but I think we have a couple, so we have listeners. I have never said anything like that. That was Jake R. that said that directly. And if you think we sound anything alike, you are mistaken. And if you can't just tell from our voices, and obviously you listen because you know I'm a big Buffalo Trace fan, that maybe you should be a good listener and watch us on YouTube like some of our other people do. And then you can see who's talking about stupid shit, which is not normally
It was a
me.
YouTube comment.
I thought it was a Spotify comment you sent me. So even worse, pay attention to what we're doing. It's not that difficult. Andrew, just figure your life out, man. I don't hate Buffalo Trace. Little Heaven Hill bitch over here hates it. So he's the one that said it, not me. And I just, it seems to me that immediately our listeners are going to point a finger at me. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to point one right back at them. But not the index. Oops, that's the index. Not the pinky. Not the ring or the thumb.
Dan.
The one you hold up.
This
don't give a fuck.
All of our shots of being monetized are out the window.
Because I'm not singing it. I'm not even rapping the Eminem right now. Because Andrew Pham is full of bullshit. That's what I got to say, man. Pay attention. That's all we ask. If you're going to listen, just pay attention. Not that hard.
Now you're going to scare half other listeners to never comment.
You know what? Maybe we'll get good comments after this.
All right,
thanks for listening, Andrew. We love you.
We love you. Feel free to comment. We promise we won't put you on blast. Dan might, but
I will.
The rest of us won't.
Just will. If you're talking shit at me, you better have your thoughts backed up and better have your shit straight. Anywho.
Oh my god.
Blend off results. Jake,
Anywho.
you talked so much shit.
I did.
Jake R talked so much shit for a very long time.
I did. So I talked a lot of shit. I came in last, and I have thoughts on why.
Because your whiskey
Not
sucked. I mean,
excuses.
that should be
I'm
the
not-
only thought.
This is not an excuse. This is a revelation about myself. As the people know that attended the event, I had 2 blends. I made one specifically to my flavor preferences. And then the second one, I was actually just kind of dicking around and found that switching 2 of the whiskeys actually produced a much sweeter, chocolatier, more dessert forward kind of flavors, and I liked it. So I had those 2 recipes, and I was conflicted about which way to go because
So you're saying it's Jenna's fault?
no,
I thought she picked which one.
No,
I
she
picked
told him
which
to go with
one.
his
She
heart.
told you to go with your gut. Yeah.
So I ultimately made the decision to go with my flavor preferences, which apparently only about 1/3 of people actually enjoy, because that's about
not
the
even
number
a,
of
not even a
votes I
third.
got.
Based off the numbers, that's not true. That's about 20%.
Yeah, it was about 20%, but
Yeah, it was about one person at every table said that they liked mine.
And
the
most
best.
tables were 4 people, so that's around a third. You're an engineer.
It was
One
30,
out of 4 is 30.
I got 32 votes.
Mm-hmm.
There should have been
120,
120.
right?
Yeah, so that's a little
40,
bit.
80. Yeah, so about no, there should have been a little more. 130 or 40. It should have been 100, 140, right around there.
Yeah, so
'Cause
yeah,
give or
it's-
take, there was 46 to
We
48.
had
I think it was
134 votes.
48 people.
We had
So it's
134
more.
total tickets in.
All right,
So
that's true. We got to count the tickets because some people may have not thrown a ticket in there.
yeah. So it was about 25% of people. 25%, something like that. I also noticed in speaking to people that a lot of the people that picked mine as their favorite split their vote as well between not mine and Dan's, but mine and Gold Eagle Jake's. So I think there is definitely a flavor profile preference in the realm of not super sweet, which in my opinion, Dan's blend was super sweet. Though I did enjoy it. And for everyone that wasn't there, all 3 of our blends were really good. I'm not knocking anybody.
I'll add on to that and defend you there. Yes, I think all 3 of them were really good. And as me being Gold Eagle Jake, we're the ones, ultimately putting on the event, I guess you could say, and people kind of show up to expect that they're not going to be just drinking garbage. I had a little worry in the back of my mind because we never tried any of our blends. I didn't even try my blend before I poured it. Obviously, I tried it when I blended it, but who knows? It could have sat in the bottle for the day that it sat in the bottle and completely turned to something different. But they were all solid. There wasn't one that I wouldn't drink. I would just much prefer to drink Dan or my blend.
yeah, and to, on that line, one ditto on that sentiment. 2, I got to come back to Jake R here in a second. But 3, I liked all 3 of our blends better than both ones we had in the first round, which were
I would
Fox and
agree with
Odin
that.
and
Yeah,
Knob 18
I'd agree with that too.
I would say all 3 of ours knocked off Nancy Fraley and Knob Creek. So
Yeah, Nancy Fraley ain't shit. Now I'm putting Nancy on
Not shit.
blast. Nancy.
Yeah, fix your nose, Nancy. But Jake, so your revelation, you just said you have a revelation. You didn't come back to what
My
your
revelation is
was.
that people don't fucking like what I like.
or the revelation is your palate is a piece of shit. It's either one of those.
It's either
to come
one.
to.
It's either one, to be honest. But yeah. So the other lesson that I learned is to lean towards taterism, because if I would have embraced taterism,
what?
I
There
would
was
have
no tater bottles in
performed
mine.
much better. Well,
no
no,
tater
but
bottles in mine either.
my backup blend was much more in the realm of sweet dessert,
right, so
kind of like
let me
crowd pleaser. Tater's not really the right word. It was much more of a crowd pleasing kind of palette and profile than the blend I chose.
Your blend was very mild. It was very, very balanced. And it's something where if you gave to someone, it probably wouldn't blow them away, but they'd be like, oh yeah, this is good. I can drink this all day, anytime. So props to you on that sense. But, I knew going into this that we needed to make something that was going to kind of pop and make people go, wow. And ooh, like I can get behind this one for sure. So that's why I went with. If you want me to go into what I did,
I was going to say we should go into how we all did it because we talked briefly about it at the event. But Jake, yours is Jake. Ours is going to take the longest because he spent weeks trying to figure this out. Sent us pictures of 10 different Glencairns all out with his notebook. Jake's last, but he last because he knows that picture message did come through. Me and you put hardly any effort into it. Jake, Gold Eagle, and Dan put hardly any effort into it. Jake, why don't you go through your entire process that led you to fail so badly?
All right, so it started on Black Friday.
God, Jesus, it's longer than I thought.
It was only 2 blending sessions. It was Black Friday, and then it was after Christmas. So me and my buddy Jimmy. Shout out to Jimmy, who was one of 3 people that nailed on the first shot which was which, with no context whatsoever. So
but he had tried yours, so he had a little.
I got to give a shout out.
Mine was completely different
Aaron.
from what. Yeah.
I got to give a quick shout out to Aaron Hensgen because he is a loyal listener and he picked out whose blend was whose just on the nose.
Mm-hmm.
Just by listening,
which I'll get to when I get to my turn.
Yeah, that was impressive.
You can get to it, sure. Which I guess if everyone were to put in their guesses, I'm sure some people would have hit it. I mean, you got a 1 in 3 chance of guessing whose is whose, but he was pretty confident right away on whose was whose. So props to Aaron. Thanks for listening.
But anyway, so back to thanks, Aaron. We appreciate your participation in our events and listening.
Absolutely.
So I put some blends together. I thought they were awesome. I did not spit anything out that night, so I was really hammered. Went back and tried it 2 weeks later and thought they were all super mediocre. So I tossed them out and started from scratch. Then the second time I did it, I decided I was only going to use 4 bottles. I picked the 4 ahead of time. And I was going to try and proportion them properly in order to get what I thought were the peak elements of each one. So I had 4 Roses Small Batch Select, Dickel 15-year single barrel, Elijah Craig Barrel Proof A122, and then the Knob Creek single barrel that we picked on the show a little over a year ago. So what I did was I poured a control glass that was 25% each. Then I had 4 additional glasses that were 70% of each one, and then 10% each of the other 3. The reason I did that was to see how each bourbon kind of individually stood out amongst the group. Then I could go back to the control and kind of fine tune what notes I was getting out of each mini blend or whatever. From there, I took notes on like what the different palates and finishes and noses were for each one. And then I kind of tried different ratios to try and make the best palate, finish, and nose elements stand out from the different whiskeys. I went into this trying to build a particular flavor profile, like which I said is my go-to, which is like oaky, dark dried fruit, more in like the like nutty kind of end of things, and like not very sweet. And I believe that that's exactly what I achieved with my first blend. However, in the experimentation, I had a second one come up that I tried, and I was like, wow, this tastes like dark chocolate. Like completely. Even the nose was like heavy chocolate. So I ended up bottling both at full 750 milliliters. And ultimately ended up going with my flavor profile preference, which, like I said, apparently does not carry through most of the population. So, but
So
it's
if you
fine
like
because I
whiskey,
put up
more than likely, don't listen to what Jake has to say and listen to Gold Eagle, Jake,
I
and
put
Dan.
up something that I was personally proud of and I would personally enjoy drinking. So that was the best I could do.
Millennial thing I've ever heard. It's like your mom putting your first grade art on the refrigerator. Jesus.
I'm
Hey.
giving myself
You know what?
the accolade
We're
of
gonna-
staying true to my preferences, and I would blend it again and I would enjoy it myself. So
We're gonna shit on your blend all night. So just going back to the little positive, everyone did like all the blends a lot at the tasting. There wasn't one that people didn't like. Obviously, they liked ours more than yours, though.
So were you, just with what you were saying there, like one of the things you had in yours was Dickel 15. Were you putting that in to get some more of the age statement, more of the oak flavor in it? Is that the reason for that?
yeah, that was the main reason for that. I also like the like Tennessee kind of flavor notes. So that's kind of, I was looking for a little bit of something different than just a bunch of Kentucky bourbons. So
here's kind of like
addition.
I was gonna say, here's kind of an interesting transition, because when you talk to some of the best blenders out there in the in the U.S., like Barrel Craft, Bardstown Bourbon Company, I've heard this from them before. I've heard the question get asked, like, why do you guys have to put Dickel in so many of your blends? And their answer consistently is, it's just really, really good to blend with other whiskeys, especially when it hits like 13, 14 years plus. It's like a key component for blending. And I thought it was interesting that you guys both put Dickel in your blends. And I had someone point out, like, oh, if they didn't put Dickel in their blends, then you guys might have scored a little bit higher.
I wasn't upset with my score.
There's like Dickel in like every Bardstown discovery.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Pretty
So like
sure.
going back to like if you there is a lot of Dickel, and when this specifically happened at Bardstown, somebody asked like, why'd you have to ruin all your bourbons by putting in 10% Dickel and everything? And their answer was, if you're actually a blender and you know how to blend, you know that Dickel works really, really well in blends and just kind of helps round it out and bridge the gap between the other whiskeys that you're blending in. And that's what I did with the Trader Joe's bourbon, which we'll get to when I talk about mine. But yeah, I mean, I didn't really taste Dickel in either of your blends. Like I couldn't pick it out.
No.
So I just thought it was interesting that somebody had that comment.
And also, Dickel's not bad. Like I feel like
No.
I feel like Tennessee whiskey gets shit on just because it's not Kentucky. I think we've done episodes about this before, but
Dickel gets shit on, and some of it's not great, but it's also extremely cheap compared to other whiskeys for their age. Like their 15 years sits on the shelf around $60, and their 13
which
years
is ridiculous.
On the shelf around
it's like
$50.
unreal.
Yeah. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys it's the best, but I don't think it's as bad as people think, especially once you get to the 13, 15-year mark. It kind of changes a little bit and rounds out a little more. But
yeah, so the other reason I also used that Dickel 15 was because it's a fairly low proof. It's like 86, I think. And I wanted to bring the proof down on my blend a little bit because the Elijah Craig and our Knob Creek were pretty high proof. I didn't want to present a like 120 or 115 proof whiskey. So that 86 proof Dickel gave me a bit of a buffer on the proof, and I think I ended up at like 106.
You were at
0.72.
106.7.
Yeah, which is a nice sweet spot, I think, between like 105 and 110 for almost anyone to enjoy. So that's another reason why I used that Dickel.
Yeah, I also found it interesting with you two because you guys both use two of the same bottles. And we can talk about it a little more at Jake's, but you guys both use that Knob Creek same Knob Creek single barrel as well as Four Roses small batch. So,
yeah, I was going to touch on the Knob Creek a little more when I talked about mine.
Yeah. Mine, I did not put nearly that much thought or effort or anything to it. So, like, I heard a couple things and people said, oh, they knew it was mine because it smelled craftier. And they knew it was mine because it was a sweet bomb. I didn't try to hit any flavor profile. I mixed a couple things together. I made 3 mash bills and I took them into work because I didn't hate either of them. So I asked our master distiller what his thoughts were. But I had 0 craft in mind. My one mash bill or my one recipe I put together that didn't make it in did have Whiskey Acres in it. When I decided I was going to do 3 things, 3 different tries, I was going to make one wheated because I like wheated bourbon. I was going to make one with a lot of Heaven Hill in it just to shit all over Jake R. And then I was going to make one with a bunch of stuff on my bottom shelf. And I wasn't trying to hit any flavor profile. So the wheated mash bill was 30% of a Whiskey Acres 7-year, 30% Weller Special Reserve, 30% of a Maker's Barrel Proof that I had just for, or Maker's Private Select, just to add some proof, and then 10% Weller 12. That by far and away had the best nose of all of them, but just kind of fell flat on the palate, and both me and Rob had the same noses or thoughts on that. The second mash bill that I did was the mainly Heaven Hill, which was a Elijah Craig barrel proof, a Larceny barrel proof, and my James Pepper 1776 100 proof to get the proof down a little bit. I was shooting for around 110. And then the third one I did was equal parts Old Grandad 114, Early Times bonded, Dickel 8-year, and then Heaven Hill bonded. So when me and Rob were tasting through them at work, we thought that the Heaven Hill or the Heaven Hill Heavy blend and the bottom shelf blend were both pretty darn good. They didn't have the nose of the first one. And we kept going back and forth because we thought it would be funniest and best if I just went in with basically all lower shelf whiskeys and tried to win with all lower shelf whiskeys. But the proof was pretty low, and we wanted to get the proof up a little bit. So we said, well, what if we just for fun, because we still had a little bit left in my little 100 milliliter bottles, we're like, what if we did 2/3 of the cheap one and 1/3 of the Heaven Hill? So we just mixed them together in a Glencairn, swirled it around, tasted it. We're like, yeah, that's the one we want to go with. So my blend ended up being a mixture of those two. Again, I wasn't trying to hit any specific type of flavor profile. Like, yes, I'm normally sweeter. It was a high rye bourbon, which I like wheated bourbons, but my second favorite is high rye, which Pepper's a very high rye. Pepper's 36% rye. But even like Belle Mead's like a 30% high rye, and I like the Belle Mead as well. Mm-hmm. But we just thought they tasted good, and we wanted to get the proof up. Now, the one thing I liked about Jake Gold Eagles was it had more proof than both, because mine was 105 and Jake ours was 106. I really wish I would have got up to 110, which I could have done if I would have flip-flopped and did 2/3 of the Heaven Hill one and 1/3 of the bottom shelf. Probably would have got me to the proof point I was looking for. I think a little bit longer, stronger of a finish would have helped mine out and kept the score a little bit closer to Gold Eagle Jake's, and then
we were pretty
Jake
close.
by even more.
Yeah,
but there was very little thought or effort. It was just stuff I saw on the bottom shelf. I was debating on the Dickel, and then the reason I put it in, if people do a lot of grilling, I'm going to ask both the Jakes this. What type of beer do you use if you're going to do beer brats?
I don't know. I was told always use Mexican beer.
I was told always use the cheapest, skunkiest beer you can find because it adds the most flavor.
Oh.
And I thought by adding, I'm not saying that Dickel is cheap and skunky. It's just something that's different than everything else in the profile.
I think that's exactly what you're saying.
I've talked about how I like Dickel 8, but I just wanted something to change the flavor profile quite a bit. And 17% of my blend was Dickel.
I will say it's interesting that you and I both had Dickel, Heaven Hill, and Jim Beam products in ours.
Yeah.
We only differed on, I had Four Roses and you had, what was the Early Times?
Early Times and Pepper.
And Pepper in the
but I'm
cheaper
surprised
blends.
there wasn't more MGP.
Yeah.
I to avoid MGP because I didn't want to have to try and figure out mash bill issues if
it
was.
Well, I do
most
tend to like
MGP. I think is straight bourbon, but
I tend to like a lot of these Kentucky, Indiana blends. So, like originally, I was gonna go for some kind of Kentucky MGP blend, and just whatever I poured didn't work out to include MGP. So, I was surprised there wasn't more MGP in here for any of ours.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just like I knew people were going to think that I was probably going to use Whiskey Acres stuff in it. I did one blend with Whiskey Acres, which it wasn't a bad blend. It just, wheateds can be soft. Some people thought I might have done a Tater blend, which I guess my wheated had Weller in it, but I was only mainly using that because Gold Eagle Jake told me that a lot of times he doesn't put Weller in the blind tastings because it always wins.
Back up. We don't put Weller in the blind tastings because it's so soft.
And people usually vote for it.
Yeah.
Which would mean it normally wins.
Because it's so soft that no matter what you put it next to, people will gravitate towards it because of how soft it is.
Yeah.
It's just the mouthfeel that Weller gives.
Yeah. It made for one of the best noses I've smelled in a while, and even Rob said the nose. Like as soon as he smelled him, he's like, "This is going to be the winner, just by nose." And the nose was incredible on it, but it just, again, it was soft. It didn't have much punch to it. It didn't have a lot of character, so I didn't go with that one. But no, I didn't use any Tater blends. I didn't use any craft. I just picked random things off my shelf, and some of them I just wanted to get rid of, and threw them together, and it came out okay.
So I want Jake to go first, but I have an interesting thought that I want us to discuss after Jake is done explaining his,
All right.
particularly about nose, palate, and finish. So go ahead, Jake.
All right. Let me take a pour of some Knob Creek Bourbon Matters and Gold Eagle Single Barrel before I dive into this bad boy.
Which is gone, right?
Oh yeah, long gone. I mean, this thing sold out years ago.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, good transition. So Knob Creek is my answer when somebody asks me what's your favorite bourbon. It's always Knob Creek Single Barrel. I think for the value, for the age, for the taste, for the boldness, for the oakiness, whatever. I could go on and on and on. Knob Creek Single Barrel is just an easy but also genuine answer for what my favorite bourbon is. So I usually save about 1 to 3 bottles of every Knob Creek Single Barrel pick that we do, and going back through what I had from that, I thought it was only fitting that I used the Bourbon Matters one. So I didn't taste through old single barrels and pick the best one. I just picked the Bourbon Matters one because this is the Bourbon Matters podcast. So,
But it's also the
I
best.
knew it might be, yeah. So with my blend, I wanted to achieve bold, sweet, and balanced. Okay, those are the 3 things that I was going for. I knew people like sweet, people want to taste flavor, so there needs to be a lot of pop, but you don't want it to be too sweet or too bold. It kind of needs to be balanced a little bit. So blending is not as easy as it seems. I'll start with that. If you've been listening to Bourbon Matters, what's that face for?
Mine seemed pretty darn easy. I didn't really thought or effort into
You
it.
got lucky then. Well, you attempted a few blends and you picked from your best, but I'm telling this because blending, a lot of times when it comes to blending, you think, all right, I love these 3 whiskeys, so I'm just going to put them together, and it might taste completely horrible. So I procrastinated and waited till the day before to do this, which I did not intend to do, because I actually thought that blending it early and letting it mellow together and just sit there together for a couple weeks would probably be the best route to go, but obviously that's not the case, unless Jake just really screwed up his blend. So I took all the whiskey I had in my house that would qualify for the blend off, which was under $80. Only one can be finished. Has to be a straight bourbon at the end, so I picked mostly all bourbons. And to your listeners, this is probably going to shock you, but it was only 9 bottles that I had that would qualify for this. I really don't keep a big collection or anything at my house, just because the bar at the store is also my collection, I guess you could say. So Knob Creek Single Barrel, put 2 different blends together. The first one was Knob Creek Chattanooga Single Barrel. I think that was the key on why mine won, because the high malt just gives it a lot of sweetness and kind of gave it that pop that it had. And then this is going to shock most of you, Trader Joe's Barrel Entry Proof Bourbon, which admittingly I threw it in here because I wanted to get rid of it. I buy all the cheese and crackers for the tastings at Trader Joe's, and I happened to see a $30 bottle of 125 proof, barrel proof Kentucky bourbon. So I just picked it up off a whim. It's very mediocre. It's very balanced, like way too balanced. So I kind of considered this my Dickel portion of the blend, even though it was Kentucky bourbon and probably from Barton. So I mixed together equal amounts of Knob Creek Single Barrel, Trader Joe's, and the Chattanooga Single Barrel, and that tasted amazing. My second blend was Knob Creek Single Barrel, Wilderness Trail Single Barrel, and Weller Full Proof, and that tasted god awful. I had to dump the blend out. I don't know why or how it tasted that bad, but it just did. It was completely unbalanced and did not taste like anything I'd want to drink. So I just gave up on number 2. And number 1, I was like, all right, how can I kind of round this out a little bit? It's 122-ish proof, and I think I need to get a little more, mellowness in there. So took one of the best old trustworthy bourbons that there ever was, Wild Turkey 101. put a couple minis in there. I had a couple minis left over from my overseas trip that I took earlier this year. And then I had a mini Four Roses small batch. And as we know, that's very buttery, very creamy. So I felt like those two would kind of really round out the blend. And I started just with a glass and kind of split that first blend into 3 glasses, and then just added a little teeny bit of a time of Wild Turkey 101 and Four Roses small batch into each glass, and just kind of saw how that played around until I got my final answer there, which was 25% Knob Creek single barrel, 25% Trader Joe's barrel entry proof bourbon, 20% Chattanooga single barrel, 23% Wild Turkey 101, and 7% Four Roses small batch.
Nice.
Yeah, so
And it won.
You just get mad and leave the podcast.
Yep.
I would do that too if I got beat that badly.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know. I mean, I think we're doing just fine without him, actually. Let me text him.
Oh, his power went out.
I was wondering if that happened.
Full house power outage.
I don't know what the fuck happened. Yeah. I was
We
about
thought
to,
you just got mad
I was
talking
about
about
to
you losing.
explain how I got my chocolate flavor in my whiskey, and the power just went out.
We thought you were just mad that we were talking shit about how bad your whiskey was and left.
Yeah. So as I was saying, we're talking about the Four Roses and how creamy it is, and it has that like very like almost like velvety kind of like
Yeah, just like very balanced,
Texture and,
vanilla-y,
yeah.
creamy. And I guess like just to touch on mine and going back to mine really quick, you know, I wanted that bold, sweet, and balanced flavor profile. And when I blended together the Knob Creek, the Trader Joe's, and the Chattanooga, it was very bold and sweet. And I was just missing a little balance. And that's why I was like, all right, let's throw in some Wild Turkey 101. Let's throw in some Four Roses small batch just to kind of round it out and hit a little bit lower proof point. And I think that made all the difference.
yeah, because I ended up using Four Roses as my base at 40% in all of my blends because I think it's so balanced and it has just a very nice it had a great nose. It had the best nose out of all of the like individual kind of blends that I did. So which is why I kind of put it forward. But I think the way that the Dickel meshed with the Four Roses was what produced that like super strong chocolate note in both the nose and the palate in my backup blend. Because like I said, the two blends that I brought to the event, the one I submitted was 40% Four Roses, 30% Elijah Craig barrel proof, 20% Dickel, 10% Knob Creek. The chocolatey one was exactly the same, except Dickel was 30% and Elijah was 20%. I think that additional Dickel was what really brought out that like chocolate note in the Four Roses, which was interesting. And like, you know, the last round of the event was the Alien vs Predator Maker's Mark Gold Eagle picks, and like those are only one stave different in the blends, and they're like unbelievably different. They're like nearly polar opposite in how they taste. So it's just super interesting how small changes can really direct a blend in different ways.
So you just mentioned something there when you were talking about the chocolatey thing of just another how much effort you put into this to get your ass kicked. You named your whiskeys. Like I put mine together Wednesday night and tested it Thursday, and Jake put his together Friday, and we drank it Saturday. And you're spending time thinking up names for your whiskey.
I was a week early. I had to do something while they were resting.
God, the amount of effort you put in just is funny.
I did what I thought was going to be the best thing.
It's
Obviously, it's
That's
not
what I said earlier in
everyone's
the
cup of tea.
podcast. What like blending is tougher than you think. You put together 3 or 4 things that you think are really, really good whiskeys, and they could be the best whiskeys in the world. And once you taste the blend, it's like, oh, this is terrible. Like the second blend that I did, Knob Creek Single Barrel, my favorite bourbon, Weller Full Proof, obviously a good crowd pleasing bourbon, a really good pick of Wilderness Trail, and it was undrinkable. Like 3 whiskeys that are all really good on their own, completely undrinkable blended together.
Yeah, and like last week I talked about excuse me, one of the first blends I did, I felt like I needed some kind of like brighter notes in it. So I went to Eagle Rare thinking that I could get like a little bit of that like fruitiness to come through. I put like 5% Eagle Rare, and the whole blend just tasted like grape juice. So like a lot of this is really like a very difficult balancing act of these different notes and getting them correctly, and even like starting from a good foundation of notes to choose from. Is every time I tried to use Buffalo Trace in one of my blends, it just overpowered everything, no matter how little I actually put in. Which is probably why I would assume that Buffalo Trace is not used in blends very often. One, because it's not readily available to most people, I would imagine. But also it's
definitely not readily available.
Buffalo probably doesn't even. I doubt Buffalo sources out.
They're probably not sourcing out anything.
I wouldn't think they did at all. But even if they did, I think they're so distinctive that it's fairly overpowering, and everything would just taste like Buffalo Trace. That was my experience blending the first time around. But yeah, so anyway,
so the event was fun.
Yeah.
Probably the biggest like oh shit moment I had was when we were going up to get our bags to start counting tickets. And one of the guys that was sitting right by the bags, Gold Eagle Jake, asked him, he's like, how does it look? And he looked at me and he goes, looks like Dan didn't get a ton of votes. I'm like, fuck. and then it was like my whole like, well, I didn't even try, so it's not that big of a thing. And I started counting tickets, and I got to 40. I'm like, well, unless this is an even split, I got around a third of the vote. So if I lose, it's either going to be really close or really, really far apart. And I looked and I saw your stack of tickets, Jake, and I'm like, well, I didn't lose to him. And then by this time, I realized me and Gold Eagle Jake comes walking over there with this big shit-eating grin. How many tickets you got? And at that point, but I was worried because I thought I was going to have no tickets in there. And I'm like, I got a decent amount.
I wish Jake was at our table because, like I said, my buddy Jimmy.
Oh, he talked a lot of shit about my blend.
Tasted each one, just one sip each, and he was like, "Oh, I know whose is whose." And, I was like, "Okay." He named them off exactly, and Dan was like, "How do you know?" And he's like, just based on what you guys talk about on the show. And Dan was like, oh, yeah, okay. He tried to play it off. And Jimmy was like, yeah, A sucks. Which was Dan's. And Dan's face just went like totally blank.
No, I kept a shit-eating grin on my face the entire time because I almost always have a shit-eating grin on my face. But again, it's like, I love how those people guessed and thought like, oh, this is easily Dan's because this is what he likes. I didn't even try to hit any flavor profile. Like both of you guys talked about trying to hit something.
I for sure, if I had no idea and you had given me those completely blind, I absolutely would have nailed that A was yours.
I mean, we got to give the people props. They did a pretty good job guessing on whose was whose.
I would have.
Yeah,
I would
a
have
lot
got.
of people did very.
If I didn't know mine and Jake ours, Jake, I'd have been Gold Eagle. Jake, I'd have been able to tell yours just because it was the proofiest one.
Which I wasn't even like aiming for. Like I could have gone for like a 130 proof bomb, but I just wanted something that tasted good, and I was actually shocked that mine was the highest proof. So when I found out that mine was like, what was it, 116 proof, I think,
115 basically.
So when I found out mine was 115, I was like, oh shoot, like maybe I need to bump this up, because if you guys come in with 120, 125 proofers, people might gravitate towards that. Just because the proof point. But when I tasted them originally, when I went 1, 2, 3 right across the board, I was a little nervous because I did get a lot more proof on mine. But then after tasting them again, and that initial kind of alcohol burn went away, I will say I did definitely like mine the best, which of course I did because that was my flavor profile, what I tend to go for. Now I'm not saying that mine was better, even though it won. But that's just what I go for, is a bold, little bit proofier, oakier bourbon.
Well, mine
and
was
you
the
and
best,
I-
but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
You and I it's going to sound weird, but a couple times, I think me and Gold Eagle Jake are more similar in tasting notes than what we like over Jake R. And when I tried them, the first time through, like it was close. Like, of course, I was sitting at the table with Jake R. And I went through them quite a bit, and I told Jake, I said all three are good. Yours just is missing a little bit of a punch to it. If I would have had tickets, knowing that mine was A and yours was B, Jake, I probably would have went 2 for me, 1 for you, just because I knew it. But I had you and me fairly close. Jake's was just a little bit farther off, just because it was a little thin on the palate.
Mine was very different in flavor profile than both of yours. I would say that's definitely accurate. I wasn't nearly as sweet as either of yours were, and I purposefully tried to add as much like wood note as I possibly could. So yeah, I think we were in very separate parts of the flavor spectrum.
Yep, short in the votes too.
So anyway, one of the interesting arguments that I got into, not argument, discussion that I got into at the event was around how you would grade a blind tasting. And the point I made was 'cause I believe I've said this a lot in the show. I've said this a lot at master classes. My nose sucks. I have horrible allergies, so most of the year my nose is completely plugged up and I can't smell anything. So I tend to just completely disregard noses unless it like totally blows me away. I gravitate much more to palate and finish. So I was curious whether or not you guys and our listeners really factor in nose over palate and finish in any kind of way.
No, I would jump in immediately and just say I completely agree with you. Like I'll judge whatever I'm tasting or whatever I'm comparing on the nose, but ultimately it comes to palate and finish. And the only time I go towards the nose for choosing something over another thing is if I'm just really torn on the palate and finish.
Finish is the biggest one for me. and I just wanted to look something up really quick because I couldn't remember the statistical number of it. I would say I have palate is about 60% of how I perceive a bourbon. And then the other 40 I would say is nose and palate. Split probably pretty evenly. But what I wanted to look up was what percent of taste is decided by smell. And it's 80 to 90% of your taste, which would be your palate, is
are you
derived
looking
from
up
smell.
stats from whiskey or just stats from like general whatever you're consuming?
General tasting. General tasting.
Biology.
Yeah, I don't know, because I feel like when I'm tasting whiskey, it's different than when you're in a kitchen and somebody pulls cinnamon rolls out of the oven, and then your brain starts thinking, oh, these are going to be so good, they smell so good, and then obviously it's going to taste really good. But I think it's a little different with whiskey because they're three things on even playing field, and then you go in to taste it.
Yeah, from the main scientific articles I'm seeing right now, it's anywhere from about 75 to 90.
Yeah,
70 to 90.
Yeah,
So,
smell is definitely super important in a tasting experience.
Yes, but I've had
and
being on plenty of barrel picks. Like I think I've learned pretty significantly that sometimes you get one that's clearly the best nose, and you really want to pick it without even tasting anything, and then when you go to taste them, it's last place when it comes to palate.
Right, and that was my question to my friend Jimmy was, would you really take the best nose you've ever had if it was mediocre whiskey over the worst nose you've ever had and the best palate and finish you've ever tasted?
I'll always take the
and he
palate.
was like, well, I'd obviously pick the palate and finish.
Yeah.
It was like, okay.
I mean, smelling it is...
Yeah.
But I think part of that is because I said that mine is the wheated blend I did had by far and away the best nose. But I think part of it is you build up. I still think it's a massive part. I think the reason that, Jake, that you're talking about some of the barrel picks, it has the greatest nose, but you don't end up picking it and finishes towards the bottom, is because that nose hypes you up so much. And then if the palate doesn't come through it, you downgrade it quite a bit because you were all hyped up for this great smelling whiskey and it didn't hit the way you thought it would.
That's probably pretty true. I would think that your nose is kind of the first introduction to whatever you're eating or drinking, and yeah, it does. I think it does set some sort of expectation. Yeah, I don't know if there's anyone that would, because like at the end of the day, you're drinking whiskey. It's all about the flavor and not the smell. So I'm not aware of anyone that would prefer a nose to a palate or finish.
Yeah, I've probably heard it from a few different people that are like, I'm a huge nose guy, and whatever I smell, and that's what I kind of gravitate towards. But that's a pretty rare scenario. I think most people are going to pick the palate and the finish over the nose all day, every day. And yes, it does kind of influence what you're going to taste, but I think at the end of the day, you're going to focus more on what you're tasting, especially if you're comparing three things next to each other, is a lot different than remembering like last week, I nosed this bourbon and it just blew me away off the smell. When things are side by side and you're tasting it that way, it's a lot different, and it's much easier to just pick off the palate.
Right. Yeah.
I will say the one thing with nose, and this has nothing to do with tasting at all, but I will say smelling whiskey is one of my favorite smells in the world. And I think a lot of people like that because whenever people, like if there's tours and they're going into the rick houses and you open the door in the summer and that whiskey smell just wafts through the rick house, immediately people smell it like, oh, this smells good. Or delivery drivers, they'll just come in and sit in the rick house and it's like, oh, this is such a great smell. And I think that's something unique with whiskey is no matter what, the smell of whiskey is very pleasing to the
Yeah.
Well, at like almost every stage too.
And Dan,
like from fermentation to like distillate.
And Dan probably has better sense than we do because being a distiller and blending whiskey together and whatnot, I'm sure you rely on your nose a lot more than you do your palate because you can't just drink all day every day and be a functioning human, even though we wish we could.
Yeah, it's the biggest thing. I mean, especially when you're distilling for the cuts, you're tasting stuff, and you probably rely. I rely more on my taste when I'm making cuts than I do on smell.
Is that why you're starting to go blind?
No. I'm going blank because I'm fucking old. It's easier. Like when stuff's coming out the still right off the bat at 160, 170 proof, it's hard. I mean, you can still get some flavor profile off of that, but the alcohol cuts in hard. So like usually when you're trying to make that heads cut, I'm going more on the taste that I'm used to tasting of when the heads are out. But everything else, it's heavily smell. But yeah, even like when people walk in the distillery and they just smell the fermenters doing their thing. I mean
that's my favorite.
Yeah,
I love it.
The least smell the smell I enjoy the least is probably the distillate, just because it's pretty alcohol forward.
Yeah.
But no, it's you're using your smells and no. I mean, every day you walk by each fermenter and you give yourself a little waft to see how it's doing. I mean, you're using your nose a ton. So,
all right. Well, I think we beat this horse to death.
What, that I won?
Jake, either you won or Jake R lost. I'm fine with celebrating either of those.
Jake R lost.
I mean, overall, this was
I won. Dan was a very, very close
I'm trying
second.
to be a good loser.
I know
you guys are making it really hard.
Is that like a New Year's
You're being a
resolution?
great loser.
It's like a New Year's
but
resolution.
we talk shit a lot on this podcast, so we have to put you down, especially because you're the one that's been talking, saying he's been working on his blend since Black Friday.
Yeah, I guess. Well, now this means that we're going to have to do our March Dramness again. And I'm going to end up winning March Dramness. So I'm going to put that out there right now.
Oh, boy.
Yes, because Jake will throw the most. He'll throw his very high end bottles in that just so he can win. Like always.
You know it.
I'll do what I did last time and throw in some bottles I want to get rid of.
Oh my god.
Let's do it.
Which is the same way I did my blend and the same way Jake did his blend. Got some stuff we want to get rid of. Let's throw it in here, see what happens.
Yeah, we should do more competitions. These are fun.
It was a lot of fun.
I like this a lot.
Honestly, props to you guys for coming up with this idea. I think it was really cool to do it at the store and engage our listeners and promote it to our listeners first.
Yeah.
Our good listeners. Let's not talk about this Andrew.
Yeah.
Leave him alone. Oh my god. All right. So I lied to everybody last week. Raj is coming on next week. It's confirmed for real.
He doesn't learn.
It's for sure this time. I swear. Okay. If not, I'm gonna go to Vermont myself and find him. Just kidding, Raj. Just please come on the show. That's going to be a lot of fun. Like we talked about, we're going to try several different Armagnacs, a rum, and their new rye. I have this rye sitting in my office, and it's been killing me that I haven't. I'm trying not to try it before we have the actual episode. But I might break.
Yeah, why don't you bring that bottle into the store and we'll fill it in little sample bottles and get a little taste.
I gave you. Oh, I owe you a sample.
The rye, right? Yeah,
I've got your samples. Yeah. I got to bring your sample. I got Dan
my samples
his
already.
Yeah. But so yeah, that's gonna be fun next week. Check that out. You can find us on Instagram at Bourbon Matters. You can find us on Facebook. Search for Bourbon Matters. We are on YouTube, Spotify for video. You can also listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're looking for good bourbon, Where should they look?
goldeaglewine.com or 255 Peterson Road, Gold Eagle Wine and Spirits, or Whiskey Acres. Sorry, Dan. You can go to Whiskey Acres and find some good bourbon, or you can buy Whiskey Acres at Gold Eagle. So yeah,
Tell Dan you want the VIP straight from the barrel tour.
follow Gold Eagle on Facebook at Gold Eagle Spirits. Follow us on Instagram at Gold Eagle Wine. Download our app and shop with us at goldeaglewine.com for pickup and delivery and soon shipping to certain select states. Yeah.
Keep an eye out for events.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, you know what, Jake? I'll piggyback on that. If you reach out to us and talk to us and you want to come down to Whiskey Acres and get a special VIP, I'll make it happen. We'll do it straight from the
So
barrel.
look at Dan
Even
coming through.
Even Andrew Pham can get one.
There's gonna be some like random ass guy that doesn't even live anywhere near Illinois.
It's all right. Might be the person that listens in China. Who knows?
Or he's somebody
So
that is.
I tried to find
I was gonna say,
who
or
it was on
he's listened
YouTube.
to every episode and like just finally chimed in. Now he's like, "Oh fuck you guys, I'm not listening anymore."
Don't care.
I tried to find his page on YouTube. I couldn't find it, but when I searched Andrew Pham, 2 channels came up. One was a calculus professor at a university, and the other one was an Animal Crossing streamer. And I was like, please let it be the Animal Crossing streamer, but it was not, unfortunately.
Nice. All right, well, guys, that was fun. Jake, thanks for talking a lot of shit and then losing so easily.
You're welcome.
Um,
Someone's got to provide content for the show.
yeah. All right. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.